Hello, I am Dr. Meet from Department of English, Government National College, Sirsa. Today I am here with the second video of our civilization, an essay by CEM Jod that is prescribed in the second semester of BSc. Now let's have a quick recap of what we did in the previous lecture. In the first part of the chapter, that is praise of our civilization, he discusses various positive aspects of our civilization or strengths of our civilization. He begins by saying that present civilization has order and safety, and today in disputes between man and man, right has taken the place of might. He also asserts the fact that without safety, those higher activities of mankind that make up civilization could not go on. And what are those activities? Inventor could not invent, the scientist could not find out, or the artist could not create beautiful things. Now, today we have freedom from violence, we have freedom from pain as well, thanks to medical science. And today we enjoy better health and longer life, again, thanks to the developments in medical science. Our civilization today is more secure as it is widely spread. Practically no part of the world is untouched by human civilization. The world has now a chance of becoming what he says a whole or a unity. As far as selling, buying, and exchange of goods is concerned, it is already a unity. There is no danger of unknown savage people attacking and destroying our civilization, so danger comes from within, and that brings me to the defects of our civilization. And here we ended the first part of our lecture, and today we will discuss what the author or the writer thinks are the defects of our civilization. So what are those defects of our civilization? In democratic countries, men are equal before the law and have a voice in deciding how and by whom they shall be governed. We all know what democracy is, at least we have read about it, and we live in a democracy. And as we understand by it, it is a form of government or governance where the people who run our country govern our country are chosen by the people of that country, that is the citizens of that country, and they are chosen from amongst the citizens of that country, and they're supposed to, at least supposed to, work for the welfare of that citizens of that country. And this is how we can say they have a voice in deciding by whom they shall be governed and how they shall be governed, because we have a constitution, for example, and that is a set of rules the nation has agreed upon, and if we want to change those rules, again our representative by a due process of law will change. So this is how we have a voice in deciding how we shall be governed. And as our constitution makes that claim, and many of the constitutions, at least of democratic countries, of the democracies of the world, make that claim that all men are equal before law. But is it so? No, according to the author. But the sharing out of money, which means the sharing out of food and clothing and houses and books and so on, is still very unfair. While some few people live in luxury, many have not even enough to eat and drink and wear. Now, he says this division of resources, for example, if whole country is like a family or a household, and it has a given sum of money, how it is divided, or how it is how we decide that it would be spent. And he says that this sharing among us, the citizens of that country, is what he says is unfair. Unfair means unjust, and notice the use of prefix un, which changes the meaning from fair to unfair, that is opposite of fair, or unjust, that is opposite of just. Or you can make few more words like unproblematic or unheard of or something like that. You can try making few more words. Now he says that when it comes to sharing of those resources, This is not fair. This is not just. And why? He in fact explains it to us. How he says that there are, on the one side, there are people who live in luxury, and we have heard of such people. Like there are people who have 27 floor buildings as their houses, a vulgar display of money. And in the same city, we have the biggest slum of the world, where maybe 10 people, 11 people living in one small size room without basic facilities like drinking water and toilet. So this is the gap between the two lifestyles, and it's in every. We can go on, like he says, in terms of food, like lot of food is wasted. For example, you go to a wedding, and we can see how, at least wedding of a very rich person, you can see how much food is wasted. And similarly, it comes to shelter, it comes to clothing and books and education and lot more things like medical facility. For example, if today I am a person who is living in a village and I do not have enough money and I fall ill, do I have access to the same kind of medical facilities that a rich person living in the center or heart of metro city can have? No. So is with education, so is with, like, now we are getting connected through online media, digital connectivity. Is there equality? No. So this is what he is trying to say, that there is large, what we can say, chasm between the rich and the poor, a big gulf, a big gap between two lifestyles. One, that of luxury, another, that of poverty. So even in the finest of the world's cities, thousands of people live in dreadful surroundings. Dreadful means horrible surroundings. Now, if you have traveled by train in India, and if you enter any city, uh, you come across either, first thing that's visible is either the heaps of garbage or slums. Now here people live in what he calls dreadful surroundings, without the basic facilities of drinking water, uh, toilet, drainage, electricity, education, proper hygiene, medical facilities, and they live there. As author says, there are many families of 5 or 6 persons who live in a single room. In this room, they sleep and dress, wash and eat their meals. In the same room they are born, and in the same room they die. So here are the people who uh, 5 or 6 or even maybe more. They have a very small room to live in, and they do every activity of their day in that very room, like washing and eating and sleeping. And there may be couples without privacy, and like washing or taking bath, or and then cooking food, and that's the lifestyle they are living, or that is what they are forced to live. And in contrast to the people who have big houses, and every person has one room and then attached bathrooms, and even lots of room that are not even used by the people over there, and all the facilities. And that's the gap over here. He's talking about the people who live in luxury with all the facilities, like fancy cars and big houses and designer clothes and latest gadgets, and all these people you watch on TV and you aspire to be, at least aspire to have that lifestyle. And that is the gap in our society he's talking about. And he says they live like this not for fun. Maybe few of us go on fast or on diet for certain reasons, or we choose to, like, be there, like let's have a night together and 10 friends in a room, or cousins visiting. It's not like that. They do not do this for fun. They do so, but because they are too poor to afford another room. They are too poor to afford. That is a sentence structure that is used in English. That means so poor that they cannot afford. Like the news was too good to believe. Like it was so good that I could not believe. So these kind of sentences, sentence structures, you can also try a few one. Um, so here he's talking about that these are the people who cannot afford to rent another room, and therefore they are forced to live in these kind of circumstances, in contrast to the people who are living in high-rise buildings or 27 floor, not only 27 rooms building, but 27 floor house. So this is the kind of gap there is between the two kinds of lifestyles. And therefore, he says this is one of the major defects of our civilization. And it is, I think, clear that until everyone gets his proper share of necessary and delightful things, our civilization will be far from perfect. Now, if you want this civilization, which we may be very proud of, because he says a lot of things in praise of it, we may be very proud of it, but we cannot be sure of its survival, or at least we cannot say it is perfect if this does not happen. And we will, what does he say that what should be the characteristic of a civilization if it has to be perfect? One is, he says that everyone gets his proper share of necessary things. Now, what are those necessary things? Like they are food, clothing, shelter, drinking water, toilet, basic hygiene, medicine, etc. And you can perhaps add many to this list. And when it comes to delightful things, what are those? Like music, dance, painting, poetry, stories, movies, sports, or even traveling. So having leisure time to be with your family. So there can be lot. You can also add a lot according to our preferences and priorities. But what he is trying to say, that a civilization cannot be considered perfect until unless all its members have at least, if not equal, proper share of one, necessary things that are essential for our proper survival, and second, delightful things, because we are human beings and we not only want just food and shelter and of course health, but also want pleasure in our life, and that is also our right. That is the right of every human being, to have fun in life, to have happiness in life, to have pleasure in life, to have joy in life. And these are the things which give us pleasure. And you must have noticed, even the poor people, they love to sing and dance. And even those who do not have like fancy architects or designers designing their homes, they love to keep their houses beautiful. Even the mud ones, you must have noticed, they would come up with like contrast of a dark and light shade and give you beautiful patterns over there. So this is how human beings love beautiful things, or love beauty around, or to create beauty around them. And therefore they would be provided with not only the necessary things, but also an opportunity to enjoy as well as create beautiful things. And only then we can say that our civilization is perfect, and it's also secure, because if we do not have a proper balance, the things cannot survive. So with society also, if there is such a large gap in a society where on the one hand there are haves who have too much, and on the other hand there are have-nots who do not have enough, then that society does not have a proper balance, and that can be threatened anyway, maybe by a revolt, like it happened in historically. He's talking about many revolutions like French Revolution and Russian Revolution, and then in China, or crime. So until and unless we have these two conditions, one, that everyone gets his proper share of necessary things, second, of delightful things, according to CEM Jones, our civilization is far from perfect. So next threat or danger that comes is from war. A still greater danger comes from war. Although so far as buying and selling and exchanging of goods are concerned, the world could and should be a single whole. Across its surface, there still run the frontiers of different states. Frontiers mean borders between the countries. Now he says, he had already mentioned this thing, that as far as buying and selling and exchanging of goods is, the world is already one big marketplace. And if we look at the things that we use every day, we can realize that things are changing places from one country to another, one nation to another, and they are crossing borders. But that doesn't change the fact that there are borders across this world, and like goods, we cannot change the just move across those borders. We know that we need a passport, then a passport or a visa. Though of course traveling across certain parts of the region is far easier than across other parts, but still there are borders, and many of these were fixed in the distant past. Some even of the most recent go back a couple of 100 years. Go back, that is to say, to a period before the train and the motor car, the steamship and aeroplane were invented. Now, this is many of these borders were fixed, or the shapes of the nations or countries on the political map of the world were decided in the far back in history. Um, and some of them in the recent past, and he's recent again, he's saying a couple of 100 years ago, maybe 100 years ago, but he says before, many of these boundaries were fixed before the train and the motor car and the steamship were invented. Now, what are these things? These are things, these are the means of transportation. So the train or steamship or planes make transportation much easier, quicker, more efficient. So he says, yet these inventions, by making the world so small that I today in England am nearer in traveling time to somebody in India than my great grandfather was to somebody in Scotland, have made nonsense of these national frontiers by which it is still divided. So he says England and Scotland, it's just across the border. It's next to England. But he says that if my great grandfather had to travel to Scotland, it would take a much longer time than me if I were today to travel from England to India, which is far away across the continents. So that in that sense, he says that these means of transportation have made or seem to make these national boundaries or render them insignificant. But are they? He says these divisions, the political divisions, which run across mankind would not matter greatly if it were not for the fact of war. Twice already in my lifetime, from 1914 to 18, that is the First World War, and again from 1939 to 45, that is the Second World War, almost the whole of the world has been torn by war. So he says that, of course, we would say, okay, we can just go to any country, just buy a ticket of a plane or a train or a steamship and just go to any country today. But that's not so easy, and that even to the neighboring country, it's even far more difficult. Why? Because of the fact of the war, that we somehow protect our boundaries, the sanctities of boundaries. There are disputes over the boundaries of nations, and if you read newspapers or watch news, you must have come across that there are still disputes over like borders or boundaries or between the nations, and whether it be land, even across the sea, even across the air. So this is these disputes keep on coming up, and threat of war along with also keeps on coming up. So he's saying that because of this, uh, you cannot just ignore these boundaries. And he says that I have, in my lifetime, that is author's lifetime, I have twice known that how horrible the presence or how destructive uh, if war breaks out because of these disputes, and when nations either wants to protect their boundaries or expand their boundaries, they want to expand their own boundaries or area of influence, what happens? And it can, he has himself seen it, how destructive it can be, and how far-flung it can be in his own lifetime, in the form of two world wars, when whole of the world was engaged in war, and in fact divided across the groups, two major groups fighting each other across the surface of the world. Moreover, in the conditions of present day, any war that starts anywhere is more and more likely to spread everywhere. So if we have the connectivity has become like a blessing, there is a threat also, and we can feel it today even in the case of COVID, that had it been the time when traveling was not so easy uh, or not so frequent, maybe it would not, maybe I'm saying would not have spread it so fast. But of course, certain things, others like medicine, could not have reached so far fast. So that's a different debate. But of course, he says because of that, because the world is so much connected today, that anything that happens in one part of the world is very likely to reach the other part of the world, and reach it at a very fast speed. So if war breaks out in one part of the world, it's very likely that it would spread across the world, and therefore that two world wars that happen, they have taught us the lesson that how destructive they can be, and they need to be avoided. So that threat, he says, is still there with us. In 1953, we are faced with, the time he was writing, with the fact that the world has fallen asunder into two great power blocks. We have talked about it already. What is called Western Bloc, including most of the Europe and America, and Eastern Bloc, including Russia and the nations of the Eastern Europe, supported by China. So these are the two, these were the two major blocks of the world. And it was called the era of Cold War. And both of these blocks, as he says, are bitterly opposed and mutually suspicious. Bitterly means extremely, in a determined, angry way, very much opposed to each other. Here again, you can see use of ly suffix, which is used to make adverbs extremely, clearly, bitterly, and thrive again on your own. Suspicious mean they do not trust each other. Now, the world is divided into two blocks, and they are opposite to each other. They act like enemies, and they do not trust each other. So this is the kind of situation, he says, that we are faced with today. And of course, that kind of situation prevents this world from becoming a single whole. And also the threat of war always lurks, always is looming, always is there, always present. Because each is frightened of the other. And because of their fear, they spend great quantities of money in making terrible weapons, in building aeroplanes and training soldiers and airmen. Until today, a great part of the world is like a big armed camp. No, a lot of violence in this world, a large part of violence in this world is because of fear, because of lack of trust, because we are suspicious. We feel, oh, they would do this to us, he would do this to me. So we are so scared of the other that we start becoming not only angry or frightened, but also start building, for example, weapons or trying to be offensive and destructive and violent. And that is why he says that because all these nations, these two blocks, are fearing each other, scared of each other. So they spend large amount of their resources on what? In building weapons or training their armies. And today what we have reached, it is a situation where the whole world is like a big armed camp. We are a big storehouse of weapons and ammunition. And what would happen? He says a single match will set the Herrick ablaze, and with all this war material lying about, the world is again like a Herrick waiting for that match. Herrick is like this, you can imagine. So what happens if we have a matchstick? It will catch fire. Blaze means on fire. So he says this world is today like a Herrick. And anybody who lights a match, it means who just begins a dispute that can lead to violence. It would catch fire very easily because it's like Herrick. And once it catches fire, it will spread all over the world and destroy the whole world. Now you may say, all through history, men have fought wars. So what's the big deal? Our history books are in fact full of wars and battles and violence and killings and destruction, the stories of them. In fact, large part of our history books talks about wars. So what's the big deal now? You might say that all through history books there have been wars and that mankind has survived in spite of them. It has even developed and become civilized in spite of them. Survive means continue to exist, to live, or not to die. So even when we had wars earlier, when our civilization was not destroyed, we managed to survive and exist and even to progress and become, at least we think, more civilized. So what's the new worry we have today? He says this is true, but unfortunately, as part of his development, man has enormously increased his power over nature. He has learned to tap the hidden forces of our planet and use them for his purposes. Enormously means hugely, to a great degree, and to tap means to make use of something that exists. For example, tap talent or resources. Now, what has changed is the development of science, and due to this development, we have learned to control and make use of hidden forces of nature, like electricity. We can, I think, extract power from so many things today and use those forces and direct those forces in particular direction, control them, make use of them. But question is that something wrong with that? He says, yes, maybe in certain conditions. Now, if his purposes are of those of destruction, each fresh advance in his mastery of nature only increases the dangers from war. As men learn to destroy one another in even greater numbers, from even greater distances, and in even more varied and ingenious ways. Now, threat is not because we have made advancement in science, but threat is because if that progress is used for destruction, then because it has increased our power, every step towards or what we consider a step forward in science may cause more and more destruction. And he's saying that and giving an example that with every advancement, the kind of weapons, for example, if we just look at the developments of these kind of weapons and warfare, it has changed and changed for the worse. Many people may say it has progressed, but it is, if it is, I do not know if we can call it progress, because it is towards destruction, and this destruction has become easier, and it can be done on large scale. So now if we have to kill another people, we do not like, it's not like we are fighting with sword or bow and arrow and I'll kill 2 people, 10 people. I can just sit in a room on my computer and destroy a city, even a country, kill thousands of people. And there are all kinds of weapons we have, um, what he says, in ingenious ways, original, skillful, invent new ways, but it's not good for war, because finally it kills another human being, or rather human beings, and we know that it can be very destructive, and that is the threat we are facing today, that more and more advancement in science, more ability of human beings to control the forces of nature, gives him the power to destroy, what he says, at larger scale, from a greater distance. I mean, somebody sitting in America can kill somebody in Afghanistan. And destroy in greater numbers from greater distances, and varied and ingenious way, like we have biological weapons, nuclear weapons. So all these kinds of threats coming up, there is a really a need. He says that we need to worry, and man has now discovered how to release the colossal forces locked up in atom, extremely large colossal waves. Of course, he's talking about atomic bomb and nuclear bomb. In consequence, the leading nations of the world are now making atom bombs, which, if another war came, would almost certainly be widely used at large scale. And nobody knows what the effect of dropping atom bombs on large scale would be. But it is quite possible that total destruction of the civilization of the West and even other parts of the world might ensue. That means occur or happen as a result of. Now, if it's imaginary situation, but of course, those people who create these weapons, they know what they are up to, and they know the scale of destruction these weapons can cause. In fact, they aim to cause that level of destruction. So if those atom bombs are dropped, it means they would cause a large scale destruction, and if they are used at large scale, then it means, according to him, total destruction of the West. But of course, political situation might have changed today, and it may that West may destroy other part of the world, but we don't know. But one part of the world, or even large part of the world, is going to get destroyed if we indulge in that kind of idiotic war. As somebody has jokingly remarked, in the next war men will fight with atom bombs, and in the war after that with bows and arrows. Why? Because we will destroy our civilization. All the progress we have made, all the progress we boast of or brag about or claim to have made, would come to nothing. And we have to start from the beginning, and again we would come back to bows and arrows, and hopefully we do not come back to atom bombs again. So in the opinion of many, the only way to prevent this is to set up some sort of government for the whole world. 2 attempts have already been made in this direction. Now this is these are the images of Japan in 1945, when these bombs were dropped over these 2 cities, and the kind of destruction they caused. So it's not that we don't know what can happen. Only thing we should understand that what to do, and how we can prevent this is that by establishing, as he says, a form of world government, and efforts have been made to do so. The first which succeeded, the First World War, that happened after First World was called League of Nations. So a League of Nations was established so in order to resolve the issues. The second which followed was the Second World War, was the United Nations that exists even today. The purpose of both organizations was to provide a sort of law court for nations to which they could bring their disputes for settlements, just as private persons call no longer or fight in street but go to law. So it was hoped that coaling nations who had previously gone to war to settle their disputes would now go to League of Nations or to UN instead. So what we hoped by establishing these organizations or bodies was that, as he had already talked in the first part of the chapter, that now the right has taken the place of the might, and today if I have a fight with another person, I do not beat that person or I do not get beaten, we go to law. So if there is a law in the country, particular country, there can be law at the level of the whole world. And with this hope, these bodies were established, that when nations have a dispute like men in the street, they would not fight, they would not indulge in war. What would they do? They would go with these disputes for settlement to these bodies, so that there is no war. But neither of organization has had much success. The League no longer exists, uh, and the UN at the time of writing cannot yet act as a world authority because of the Great Gulf, which, as mentioned above, runs across the world between the Western nations on the one hand and the Russian bloc of the powers on the other. So when the nations do not trust each other, how they can come to one body and let it settle disputes for them. So that is that gap between these two blocks that existed at that time. But today even we know that because certain powerful nations have more power in or more say, therefore they have their way, and therefore they just happen to uh, take the lead or decide the things that the way they want, and therefore other nations, sometimes smaller nations, sometimes weaker nations, sometimes less developed nations, they also feel sidelined. So because of that lack of trust or fairness, the chances of these bodies succeeding are not much. Gulf means a wide gap. It is nevertheless clear that chief hope of the world in the future depends upon our ability to set up some form of the world government. So it may seem that this is not succeeding, but our only hope is that we learn to settle the disputes between or among us nations, not through violence or war, but by coming to an organization or a body and settle those disputes through maybe talking to each other or arriving at certain agreements. Next defect of our civilization he talks about is his complaint about machines. Yet another great defect of our civilization is that it does not know what to do with its knowledge. Science, as we have seen, has given us power fit for gods, yet we use them like small children. For example, we do not know how to manage our machines. So that's very interesting observation he makes, that science has given us power fit for gods, but gods have wisdom also. There is a beautiful word in English language, vivek, that we are supposed to use when we make our decisions. So when we behave like children and start toying or playing with these things, even I think in the context of war we were observing that, then it becomes dangerous, and sometimes it becomes wasteful also. So or that at least it's of no use to us. So he says that we have been given power fits for God. How we can just for example push a button or press a button, and we can, our room starts cooling, or we start moving, and that's a wonderful thing. Or we just can talk to somebody across borders, across miles, and you and me are talking to, or at least are able to communicate with each other. So this is wonderful. These are the powers which once were considered only gods had. But do we know how to make use of them? He says no. Machines, as I have already explained, were made to be man's servants, yet he has grown so dependent on them that they are in fair way to become his masters. So he says that, of course, when we developed machines, they were to help us. For example, to wash our clothes in easier way, or faster way, or in better way, or transport us at a faster speed. But he says that it has happened that slowly they have started having power over us. They have become more important to us, and already most men spend most of their lives looking after and waiting upon them, attending to them. So what does a servant do? He or she attends to us. But here what is happening, that we are attending to our machines, like the way we are bothered about mobile phones, or our laptops, or our cars, always taking care of them. The author thinks that this is not what was expected when machines were invented, and the machines are very stern masters, because when they become our master, you understand, master and servant. So what was expected, that we would be the masters and machines would be the servants, but things have reversed according to him, and the machines are masters and we are there attending upon them like servants. And he says that if machines become masters, they are very stern masters, very strict, uncompromising. So they must be fed with coal and given petrol to drink, oil to wash with, and must be kept at the right temperature. And if they do not get their meals when they expect them, they grow sulky and refuse to work, burst with rage, and blow up and spread ruin and destruction all around them. So imagine now a machine is like, he has a face or is getting angry like human beings. Um, and sulky means they become bad tempered and non-cooperative. Burst means explode, and with rage means anger, and blow up, suddenly become angry, and even blow up means explode also. So what happens if they have become our masters? Now we have to feed them, like we have to feed, if a servant has to feed his master, cook his meals and bring it to table. Here they are to be fed coal or petrol, like our cars or bikes or trains, or electricity today. Or they have to be washed like we wash ourselves with water, with oil, and kept at the right temperature. Now, interestingly, human beings can adjust a bit. Like if I have not got my meals, I still would work. But if there is no petrol in the tank of a car, it would not move. And that's why he says, and if they do not get their meals when they expect them, they grow sulky. They become very bad tempered. Their mood is spoiled. They do not like it and they do not cooperate. They would refuse to work. They would refuse to move and burst with rage and blow up and spread ruin and destruction all around them, because they do not work properly. So that is the situation, he says, we are facing, that because we think that is or we know that can happen, we try to keep them in good mood, and in order to keep them in good mood, we have to pamper them. So we are all the time busy taking care of them, feeding them. Yeah, it means filling the oil tank or petrol tanks, or washing them properly, cleaning them, so maintaining them, what we call them. So we have to wait upon them very attentively and do all that we can keep to them in good temper. Like if I want somebody to work, I want that person to be in good mood, especially if he or she is a master. So he or she has to be kept in good mood. So now machines are the masters, so they have to be pampered and kept in good mood. And because if they are not in good mood, they won't work for you. So if my laptop now is not working, everything stops for me. So I have to keep it in good mood, properly charged and clean, so that it can work when I require. So already we find it difficult either to work or play without machines, and a time may come when they will rule us altogether, just as we rule the animals. Now, because our whole daily routine has got tied up with our machines. Like I get up, we check our mobile phones, we have fans in the room, air conditioners, a bike, or gadgets, or in the kitchen, in the toilet. So everywhere we have it, and if we have to like carry on with our daily routine, we have to keep them in good mood, otherwise they won't work. And therefore it has become a possibility that tomorrow they may become our masters, and they may start ruling us, because the person or the thing who has power will rule us, and therefore we will be ruled or might be ruled by them. And as today we are controlling animals, they might be controlling us tomorrow. So we know very little what to do with the time which we have been given because of the machines, extra time, because we spend most of that time in attending to those machines. So he says that this brings me back to the point at which I asked a page or two back: what do we do with all the time which the machines have saved us, saved for us, and the new energy that they have given us? Because of machines, of course, we have been be able to save a lot of time. For example, in terms of travel we were talking about, or doing things at faster pace, for example washing clothes, and it also saves us a lot of energy. We don't get tired. So what do we do with that time and energy? On the whole, it must be admitted, we do very little. For most, for the most part, we use our time and energy to make more and better machines. But more and better machines will only give us still more time and still more energy. That what we to do, and what are we to do with them? So he says, today at least he says that we do not know what to do with this extra time and energy we have saved for ourselves because of machines. So what do? We do go on finding new kinds of machines that saves us more energy, more time, then more machines, and more attending to them. So this process goes on. And we should have, at least he says, think that can we do something apart from finding, or sorry, creating new kind or inventing new machines uh, with, with the energy or the time which we have now on our hands? The answer, I think, is what we should try is to become more civilized. And for the machines themselves and the power which the machines have given us are not civilization, but aids to civilization. I said at the beginning, there is nothing particularly civilized in getting into a train. He says that machines, of course, have given us a lot of power, apart from the time and energy it has saved us. But they are themselves not are not the signs of civilization. For example, if I have a smart TV at home, or a smartphone, or a smart car, it doesn't make me civilized. Here he also, these are just aids to civilization, and they can rather help us to be more civilized. But they themselves are not civilization. For example, if I step into a train, it doesn't make me civilized. Just because science has progressed and created this train, and I am living at a particular time that I can travel by that train, does not make me civilized. Yes, if I step into that train and I get a seat and I see somebody, uh, for example, an elderly person standing, and I offer my seat to that person, that may be a sign of being civilized. Therefore, but we must remember, and you will remember that we agree at the beginning that being civilized meant making and liking beautiful things, thinking freely and living rightly, and maintaining justice equally between man and man. Therefore, what is civilization? Now he comes to that and he says that because this chapter that is in your syllabus is part of a larger work. So he has somewhere mentioned that being civilized means liking beautiful things. So we talked about creating things beautiful and liking beautiful things. You can appreciate beauty around you in all forms, in forms of, for example, structure, language, shape, color, but also in terms of beauty, in terms of ideas, in terms of emotions, all kind of beauty we can appreciate. Similarly, thinking freely. If we are able to think with open mind, if we do not stick to the ideas and become fanatics, and living rightly. That is considered to be a proper way. Uh, uh, that may be kind of a variation on the ideas what is right and what is wrong, but yes, there are certain ways like we do not think that hurting somebody is a good thing, or creating problem for anybody else is a good thing. So living your life rightly and maintaining justice equally between man and man, that human beings are treated uh, justly, and creating that system, that social structure or that political structure or that economic structure, all these things would make us more civilized, because he has already said that our civilization would be far from perfect if the things or the resources we have are not distributed properly, and every person proper share of necessary and delightful things. Man has a better chance today to do these things than he ever had before. He has more time, more energy, less to fear, less to fight against, except for the dangers he has himself created. So today we have time at our hands, we have energy, because in the initial stages of civilization, all of our energy was spent on surviving, then on developing. We were fighting against, for example, he said, savages around, animals, nature, disease, and still, and then we developed and developed social structures and science in a way that we could fight and survive against all these odds. And today we have reached a point where we have time and we have energy, because we are not up against all these things, against all these dangers, except the dangers he says, the writer says, we have created for ourselves, for example, by creating an atom bomb, or um, a social structure which is not just. If he will give this time and energy, he here means human beings, which his machines have won for him, to making more beautiful things, to finding out more and more about the universe, to removing the causes of quarrels between nations, to discovering how to prevent poverty, and then I think our civilization would undoubtedly be the greatest, as it would be the most lasting that there has ever been. Now he counts those things that we can do now in order to become more civilized, or in order to prove that we are civilized. One is that making more beautiful things, and as I said, those beautiful things can of course be art like music, dance, painting, sculpture, beautiful buildings, and literature, but also beautiful ideas, beautiful emotions around us. So creating those things. And even justice is a beautiful idea. Equality is a beautiful idea. Respecting another human being is a beautiful idea. Loving is a beautiful emotion. So all these things we must learn to appreciate and create. And then finding out more and more about the universe, science, learning even about the universe, physical universe, like scientists do, and also maybe emotional universe or the spiritual universe, or the way philosophers think about the purpose of life, or the way we feel, all these things, discovering more and more, to removing the causes of quarrels between the nations, and find proper ways uh, to settle our disputes without entering into war, without violence, and to discovering how to prevent poverty. Because if there is poverty, poverty in itself is a sign of violence against the people who are poor. That is, the social structure or economic structure is insensitive, indifferent, and even, I think, violent to the people who are poor. So you cannot even call such structure beautiful, then there is no beauty around. And in order to prevent, we should find means of preventing poverty, how the poor people uh, do not remain poor. They have proper access to food, shelter, clothing, uh, and education, and medical facilities, and of course, as he says, delightful things. Then I think our, and then I think if all these things we are able to do, not only by developing means of transportation and communication, and also they also help even by preventing disease. All these are helpful, but they can only uh, make our civilization civilized, or prove our civilization civilized, if we are able to appreciate beauty, create beauty, end or settle our disputes without violence, and most important, end poverty and create equality, or at least some bridge the gap or lessen the gap between the haves and have-nots, and have more just society. Only then, he says, I think our civilization would undoubtedly be greatest. Then we would be able to call our civilization great, not because we have the latest technology, and it would be most lasting also. As we discussed before, the structure which is not balanced cannot last for long. If our society is not based on the ideas of justice and equality and liberty, and sensitivity towards others, uh, appreciation of beauty in all forms, then this society, then this structure of our civilization, what if we call it civilization, cannot last. It would come down one day. So if we want it to be lasting, it can only happen if we achieve all these things, and we have our chance more than ever today, that we become more civilized today in our attitudes, and even not personal attitudes, as well as we our social, political, economic systems are structured, so that our civilization can be called civilization. Thank you. That was all about this chapter, and I hope you were able to understand what the author is trying to say. And thank you. And next video would cover the next chapter that is in your syllabus, that is its question time. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.